Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we're going to talk about my 4 favorite chatterbait trailers. These are absolute must-haves. They all have their time and place, and we're even going to talk about how to choose them and when for on your chatterbait. So stay tuned and let's get right into it. So I've been fishing a chatterbait for years. I absolutely love fishing this thing. I fish it from the moment the ice comes off up here in the Northeast, almost all the way until it freezes again. It's probably one of the first baits I catch a fish on every single year, whether it's pond fishing because those warm up first, or even in lakes. This is one of the most effective baits, even in cold water, like 40-degree temperatures. For largemouth, you can catch them. I've caught smallmouth on some chatterbaits. Mainly, it's my go-to largemouth bait, especially if you have grass, especially if you're pond fishing, especially if you have bluegills, but it also works if they feed on shad. Just a great bait to catch a ton of fish, no matter the water conditions, all different times a year. Basically, it works all the time up here in the Northeast. If you come to the Northeast and don't have a chatterbait, you're making a huge mistake. If you live up here and don't fish it, you need to get on it because it catches a ton of fish. Now, that being said, there's a few trailers that I really like to use. They will each do different things on this bait, and they will allow it to do different things and catch different types of fish. Just because they will have different actions, appearances, make the bait do different things. I've played around with a lot of these trailers, and these are the 4 that I've really come to that I go through depending on what I have given to me. And we're going to talk about that in today's video. So my number 1 guy right here, this is one, it's just a confidence thing for me. For one, it's the first trailer I'll put in. When I take out a chatterbait, put it on, this is the first trailer I'm putting on there no matter what. I don't even care what the water conditions are. 9 times out of 10, I'm just going to throw this guy and see if it'll work, mainly because it's just a match made in heaven for a chatterbait. So this is the Yamamoto Zako right here. It's a 4-inch version. It comes in a 3-inch now, so you can put it on the Mini Max or something like that if you want a smaller version of it. The 4-inch, if you fish the Z-Man Chatterbait Elites or the Jack Hammers, it is perfect. Not only does it give it the right body profile and presentation that you need, it's going to give it that thick profile, make it look like a bait fish or a bluegill or whatever. The other thing that bait does is it allows it to get down in the water. It gives it some mass. It gives it some castability. You can really cast that bait far once you put that plastic on there because it weighs a lot. But because of the design, where it's a very sleek bait, it can sink down a little bit faster too. So you can fish these baits pretty deep even with that Zako on there, and it almost reminds me of like a flat-sided crankbait. It has a very tight wiggle. It doesn't move a lot. It'll hunt, but it doesn't move all over and wobble erratically. So in those colder water times, that's really when I want to throw that bait. Pretty much the first fish I catch every year up here in the Northeast, I'll find a sunny bank that gets the most amount of sun, usually on the north side of the lake. I'll find some rock, maybe some grass that those fish can get up in, get some sunshine. After a couple sunny days, those fish will get on those banks, and I will go throw a chatterbait with a Zako down those banks, and those are the first fish I catch every single year up here in the Northeast. It's the easiest and most predictable way to catch them, and that tight wiggling action really drives them crazy, and that's my number 1 way to catch them. I'll use it throughout the rest of the year as well. Like I said, it's just my go-to and my number 1 choice for a chatterbait trailer. Now my next one here, this is going to be more for your pond fishing guys, or especially if you fish a lake that doesn't have shad, doesn't have other types of bait fish like that. If you know those fish feed heavily on bluegills, if that's their number 1 forage, I'm going to go with a Z-Craw Jr. or a Rage Menace. It's another good one as well. I don't have one here right now. The reason I picked this guy, it gives it a different profile than the Zako. Now the Zako can look like a bluegill, it can look like bait fish, but what I do with this when I rig it to make it look more like a bait fish is I will rig it vertical with the trailer claws instead of flat like you would on a regular jig. If you rig it vertical, it has that very deep body profile to it, and it has the tail shape. It looks very bluegill-ish. So when you put it on here vertical, it's going to have that bluegill profile, and it's going to have a little bit different action than people throwing those Zakos and swim baits and stuff like that. The hardest part of this is just going to be to actually rig it straight, to be honest. Sometimes it has a hard time getting on there because the body is so thin, and that's because it's not really meant to be rigged vertical, but it works really well on chatterbait. The way this bait moves and vibrates will cause this tail to vibrate effectively as well, rather than if you rigged it flat, it's not really going to have the action that it should, nor will it have the presentation. So when you rig it flat, like you would on a jig, where it works really well and the claws go like this and it looks like a crayfish going down, crayfish usually don't like fly through the water column. Bluegills will, they'll swim around, they'll do all that kind of stuff. So if you rigged it flat, what will happen is these claws would be flat. Instead of them actually vibrating up and down and flapping up and down like they do through the water, they're actually just going to go side to side and not really do anything for you. Where if you have them vertical, they're going to flap through the water and go side to side just like a fish kicking its tail going through the water. It's a very effective one. Pond fishing works excellent. I usually don't use this very cold water because it does have a lot of added action to it over the Zacho. It wobbles a lot more, it'll hunt a lot more, it'll do a lot of different action to it, where that Zacho has that tighter wiggle. So this usually doesn't come out until at least the 50-degree range. I've caught fish down into the 40s on the Zachos. My next trailer selection here, this is going to be one that I really don't throw very often. It's going to be one for when I have warmer water, and oftentimes when I have that warmer water, I'm not usually throwing a chatterbait as much, but it still works very well, especially on like a shad spawn is when I'm going to throw this one here. This is going to be the 6th Sense Divine Swim Bait. You can get the 3.2 or the 3.8 size depending on how big your chatterbaits are, how big the hook is. You just got to match it up to see which size works best. The reason I go with this one is because it causes this chatterbait to have a tremendous amount of action. It's different than a Zacho. Like I said, that tight wiggling action, that's not gonna be present with this guy right here. It's gonna wobble a lot, it's gonna hunt a lot, and ultimately swim baits with the paddle tails aren't meant to go on chatterbaits because the head of the jig is actually gonna cause the bait on the back to have the action. So you don't need something that also has action on the back, but that's what causes it to hunt. So when you're reeling it, the tail won't work 100%, it'll work kind of intermittent and make it look weird, but by doing that, it'll catch the water in a weird way. It'll cause your bait to hunt off to the side, left and right. It'll make it more a square bill presentation than a flat-sided crankbait presentation, comparing the two there. If you're fishing dirty water, you're fishing very shallow, you're trying to get reaction bites, if you basically where you would fish a square bill crankbait against wood and bounce it off wood, if you're fishing through the grass and want to bounce it off some grass and really make it hunt through the grass and give it some erratic look, or around docks or something like that where you can't really bounce the chatterbait into the dock posts, but if you're fishing it down near the dock and it's hunting left and right and going around the dock posts, this is the bait for you. It's really going to make it do that action for you and cause it to do a little bit something different than what everybody else is doing. It's like I said, it's not one that I throw a whole lot, mostly because my confidence just lies in that Zacho, but it's definitely one that I should play around with a lot more. It's an excellent choice for on the back of a chatterbait. And my last choice for my trailers here, this is one of my absolute favorites. It quickly became to the top of my list here, and that's going to be the 6th Sense Juggle Minnow here. This is actually a new release. It just came out a little bit ago, and I found a ton of different ways to fish this thing. It's super effective, and the number one reason that I like to fish this bait when everyone else is throwing a chatterbait, I throw this one because it's a very slim plastic and it really makes it a more finesse profile. It still has a bulky head, so you're going to get that target for those fish to eat on your chatterbait. It's going to give it that bulky appearance, but it has a very thin tail. It has a ton of action. Like I said, this is just a straight tail, so that head of the bait is going to do the work. This will have the action behind it. It would work in cold water as well because it would have a very tight action to it, but it just gives it a more finesse profile, a more slimmed down approach, something a little bit smaller. That Zacho is a very big and bulky bait, and while it works and you're imitating bluegills and it makes it stand out and gives them a target to hit, sometimes when everyone is throwing that, if you can do something just a little bit different, like throw this guy, you'll tone down your chatterbait. It won't be as aggressive in the water, and it'll get those fish to come eat that bait and be a more finesse profile without having to go finesse fishing. It's something I've found a lot recently, is finding a way to power fish finesse. So I use mini flipping jigs, I'll use toned down chatterbaits, I'll do stuff like that where you can still power fish, but you can get a lot of bites doing so because you mix up the presentation than what everybody else is used to throwing. The other place that this bait has really shined for me, and one that I've used it a lot, is going to be on the new Chatterbait Mini Max. I absolutely love this bait. it is such a small profile, and you can see that bait is meant to fit perfect on there. It gives it that little tail. If you wanted to, you could cut this down even more, but that little tail that sticks out the back there, I think it adds a nice little touch. It'll have that wiggle you need. And again, if you're fishing slow, fishing finesse with a chatterbait, this is the way that I'm gonna go. I'm gonna use a chatterbait mini max and put that juggle minnow on the back here. It gives it a subtle vibration. It's a smaller blade than a regular chatterbait, so the vibration isn't going to be as hard. The bait isn't as big. The skirt is smaller. The skirt is shorter. Everything's toned down about it, and you can fish it on lighter line and ultimately get a lot more bites than other people fishing a chatterbait in the same area. It's just a super confidence booster for me sometimes to throw a smaller bait, even if it's the same thing right behind other people, to get a lot of bites. The other thing that this will do is you can take this juggle minnow and put it on a regular chatterbait and just make your big chatterbait blade in a smaller body if you still need that heavier vibration. So this one's a very versatile one. That's what I love about the Zacho so much. It works in pretty much all conditions. This one being as versatile as it is, it's probably going to come to the top of my list here very soon. It's super effective and catches a ton of fish. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video talking about chatterbait fishing here and the different types of trailers that you should use and when you should use them. If you want to see a more detailed video on some chatterbait fishing, colors, types of chatterbaits, rod breakdown, everything like that, check this video out right here. Hit that subscribe button down below so you don't miss any more of my fishing videos. Make sure you leave a like if you enjoyed today's video, and thanks for watching.